if right now you're wondering what the fuck Leibniz and Schrödinger might have in common, I don't blame you, but you're gonna find this video interesting. Let's dive straight deep into that, shan't we? Okay, so in a nutshell, the thing we're gonna discuss about today is determinism. What is determinism? Determinism is the philosophical belief according to which everything that happens is predetermined and given enough information could have been predicted in advance. For example, is this apple gonna fall if I let it do it? Well, yeah, of course, we can predict that. And how quickly is it gonna fall? When is it gonna hit the ground? And how much heat is gonna be dissipated when it does? All these things can be predicted in advance. Is this true for literally everything else? A determinist would say that's true. And this seems reasonable since classical physics, which is the first portion of physics we learn, is fundamentally deterministic. In the solar system, that's how things work. Everything that happens in the solar system at the planetary level can be predicted in advance with deterministic laws that predict everything very precisely without any error. And this is true for all of classical physics, and that's, as I said, the first physics we learn. So you might think that determinism makes sense, and this is the reason why many people thought that it did. But today, a lot of people, and among them there's myself, think that this makes actually no sense at all, because even though classical mechanics is the first portion of physics we learn, it is pretty safe to say that it is not the most fundamental physics. Quantum mechanics, quantum field theory, and in a certain way even thermodynamics are all much more fundamental than classical physics. And those theories are not deterministic. They are statistic. They are, well, random isn't really the right word, but I'm gonna use it because you're gonna get what I mean. Is this electron gonna go through slit A or slit B? Well, it doesn't really make sense to ask the question in advance. It doesn't really make sense to ask the question, what slit did it go through? It had a certain chance of going through slit A and through slit B, and what defines the electron, its state, what the electron is as an object in our current understanding of physics, is but a vector in a Hilbert space which describes these chances. So if there are two possible slits it can go through, two possible paths, you're gonna build a b-dimensional Hilbert space, and you're gonna make a vector with a module with a length of 1, which is 100%. So of course this vector represents probability, so its length has to be 1 because the total probability of the system has to be 1, and the components of this vector along the two axes, which are going to represent two slits, aka the two events that can happen, are going to be the chances, actually the square root of the chances that the vector goes through any slit. So when you get the length of the vector, you actually take the square of the two components, which are the square root of the chances, so the two chances, you sum them and you get 1, because you have to get the square of the total probability because of the Pythagorean theorem, and the square of the total probability is 1 because the total probability is 1, which is but a certain way to say 100%. And therefore, because of this understanding of quantum mechanics we got, I think determinism doesn't actually make sense. But we could make a much longer video, much more complex discussion about this, but that's not really the point of today's scenario. The point is that there is a very common argument among determinists which says basically this: everything a human being does can be traced to the previous experiences. Am I gonna eat soup or pizza tonight? Well, it is determined by my previous experiences, and even though I can't see that, I can't see exactly to which experience it's related to, it's deterministic, and therefore there is no free will. This is a very common determinist analysis, and of course I don't think it makes sense, because after all, our consciousness is but the sum of a lot of electronic gradients inside our brain, and an electronic gradient is a quantum operator, and a quantum operator obeys to the same Hilbertian mechanics we have discussed before. Though, I think that there are other ways to prove that determinists are stupid, which is a thesis I think we all agree with, and two interesting approaches come from two philosophers, which are Leibniz and Schrödinger. And yeah, Schrödinger was also a philosopher. If you don't know that, you're stupid. And I think that's interesting to notice that we can analyze the two approaches they had and notice they're actually the same. Let's start with Schrödinger's. Schrödinger's approach to this was the following. Yeah, maybe what you do is determined by what happened in the past, and maybe that's deterministic, maybe not, but actually it doesn't matter, because whatever these past experiences are, those past experiences are part of you. You ain't something weird that happens among your memories. You are the collection of a lot of shit, and among this shit there is your memory. Therefore you are those past experiences too, and therefore should that be deterministic, should those influences be deterministic, you'd still have free will, because what determines it is still inside you. It's still you. It's still you deciding. The fact that you are made of previous experiences doesn't matter. Saying those experiences are deciding what you'll do means admitting free will, because those experiences are part of me. So a part of me, aka basically me, is deciding what I'll do. This is Schrödinger's approach he explained this in the final pages of his essay on natural life, which was mainly a biological essay, an essay that tried to build a bridge between quantum mechanics and biology. And in the final pages, he started talking about philosophy. I think that most of the things he said ain't very reasonable. Like, he criticized Kantian theology, but he didn't do it really well. I mean, Kantian theology is perfect in my opinion, so criticizing it is already a lost cause. But anyhow, you can do it well and be wrong, and you can do it bad and still be wrong, and he did it bad in my opinion. But this argument he made is interesting, not really on its own, because on its own, I think that much more compelling arguments can be made given our current scientific understanding of the thing, like literally taking Schrödinger's quantum mechanics, which he didn't really understand philosophically, but that's a story for another time, and applying it to our brains to show how stupid determinism can be. But another approach that I want to talk about today is Leibniz. You may be about to say, like, Leibniz? That Leibniz? Yeah, that Leibniz. You heard me right. Because he had an interesting approach, which was basically the following. Now, Leibniz was a Christian philosopher, okay? So he believed there was a God, and all of his philosophy was centered around, his Christian beliefs. That makes no sense to try to, like, take somewhat of a secular philosophy from Leibniz, because there's no Leibnizian secular philosophy, because he was a Christian philosopher basically. But that doesn't matter. I think that just the fact that we ain't Christians doesn't mean that we can't find this philosophy interesting, because a philosophy can be flawed and still be interesting. A philosophy can be wrong and still be a crucial part of building a right opinion about something. Opinion isn't really the right word, but we ain't gonna talk about this right now. Now, what was Leibniz's opinion? What was Leibniz's take on this? It was basically the following. God knows everything. He knows the future, he knows all of time. So technically, God knows what you are gonna do in the future. So you can't have free will, right? Well, this is not Leibniz's argument. This is the argument Leibniz wants to destroy. This is what Leibniz says. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Says, yeah. And this is the way he debunks it. He says, even though God knows what will happen in the future, he still, like, exists not before you do it to predict it in advance. It exists throughout all of time. It sees outside time. So it sees all of the timeline all in one take. So when it created you in such a way that you do that because that is part of the process to make this world the best world among the possible ones. Because the main point of Leibniz's philosophy was that God is good, so God, before creating the world, saw all the possible worlds and chose the best one. Okay? So Leibniz is like, he sees all of the world, so he created you in such a way that you would, the best thing in that position long term. And by long term, I mean really long term, like to the end of time. And therefore, he created you in such a way that you do that, and therefore that tendency comes from you because that's what you are, because that's what, not really, that single thing is not really what you were created for, but in the grand scheme of things, it could even be. In other words, it's like saying God, yeah, knows what you're gonna do, but like it's beyond time, and therefore he created you in order that you could do that. Well, not that thing specifically, but also that. So that's a part of what you are. That's undistinguishable from your nature. So it still comes from your nature. You are deciding what to do in that specific moment, and therefore you have free will because you decide. God knew what you would have decided, quote unquote, in advance, but it doesn't take your free will away from you because that's God. It doesn't really make sense to think about him seeing something in advance because it sees beyond time as we perceive it. Okay? And the thing that I find interesting is that this is basically the same take as Schrödinger in a certain way. Yeah, the argument that Leibniz is trying to debunk is slightly different from Schrödinger's, even though that's still determinism, and from your past experiences decide what you do. It goes to God knows what you do, but there's still arguments about free will, and basically there's still arguments about you don't have free will since what you do is predictable. So they're the same kind of arguments, and they destroy those in basically the same way by saying that what makes that predictable, which really isn't, but that doesn't matter if you can say that, if you can prove that where that should it be predictable, you'd still have free will. You have demonstrated you have free will, period. Well, what they both do is to show that actually that thing that influences you, that makes it predictable what you do, is actually a part of who you are. If you have a fabric, and in this fabric you draw all the entities in the universe, and then you draw a cycle that contains all the ones that make yourself you, what makes your actions predictable is inside that cycle. So the decision still comes from inside yourself, and therefore you have free will. And therefore Leibniz and Schrödinger's arguments are actually very similar. They are basically the same take on the thing, and I thought this was interesting as fuck, and I want to share it with you.